April 22nd here, and sun's out and it's freezing again. We had a Arctic weather alert last night, winds up to 80 kilometers an hour. The threat of winter is still very real despite us being pretty far into spring now. I don't know if it has anything to do with the slowed down industry from COVID or what's going on, but I really hope it's gonna come to an end sometime soon. It's about 0 degrees outside, right? Well, today our high is around 0, so I won't be able to do any outdoor planting, but that's fine. I will show you guys some flower planting. So as you can see, our organic squash popped up today, or since yesterday anyways. That was super quick. Maybe a few days, don't remember exactly what day I planted them, but wow, less than a week. Amazing. I didn't even cover the tops here like I had my broccoli covered, which already sprouted. So my broccoli are up on the windowsill now, and I'll have to move these to the sun, water them today. And oh, by the way, I wanted to show I covered with this scrap cardboard. I just broke the sides open and covered it over top. It's kind of like what I'm doing with my other my other pots, to kind of contain the heat, but at the same time allow some escape from the sides. Just helps to kind of balance the heat all around the pot. Obviously, I mean, it worked for the squash. I don't know if it could, like, it dried out the top because it wasn't covered, but I mean, if you're watering every day with this size pot, you have pretty good hydro soil like I do that retains the moisture, and basically I think the component in the soil that I use, the hydro, is the peat. There's a lot of peat in this soil. I was looking up on that a little bit. Apparently it's not very sustainable. That's why it could be pretty expensive, and actually a lot of the North American peat comes from Canada, so go figure. Not such a environmentally friendly country after all, are we? No, but yeah, peat retains moisture very well. So that probably explains, the cost of the soil that I buy a lot. So these guys, parsley, this is cherry tomato, and another parsley I've had on my windowsill just up on this wall for over a week now, and still no signs of life. So I've moved them down here now since this method's working. I've covered over top. They've always had a lot of water. I think it was just not warm enough on the windowsill given the continued cool temperatures, and then the lack of greenhouse effect over top. Like with this, the sun comes, it's sunny. It's been pretty sunny. It's got good southern exposure, the window, but if you're not insulating those rays to create the greenhouse effect, to create the warming, that'll eventually warm the soil, and you don't have a heat mat or a vent underneath, then yeah, it's gonna take longer. So my only worry is now, my worry is always adding or removing, like increasing temperature or decreasing temperature. So now removing from heat, putting in a cooler area, that's not going to impact the seedlings. I mean, because this is my first time growing squash. I wasn't worried about the broccoli, so hopefully they seem very hardy. Hopefully it'll be fine. But the biggest change is when we start bringing our plants outside. That last year, my first big year starting. Actually, it was my first year starting indoors last spring from seed, and I lost about half of my my seedlings from I think bringing them out into the cold too early, like days that I brought them out that it was probably too windy or too cold. Windy as well, not just cold, the temperature, but we have to be careful. They were a bit lengthy, a bit long. My baby plants last year, so I think yeah, the wind took a toll, and then some days they were maybe too cold for my seeds. Anyway, this year I'm going to be changing that around. I'm going to either use a fan inside, or I'm going to transfer them to those little to my outdoor little greenhouses that I showed earlier, and heat them overnight, just to help them grow, help them climatize outside 24/7, so that they get a bit of the cold at night, and then they're already out there during the day. Still thinking about that, haven't decided. Turns out to be not so bad today after all. The woodpecker's out. I'm out too. Just added some manure to some of my little pots here. Sheep manure. They're just little trees and not vegetables or fruits. I don't use commercial products directly as of yet on my edibles, as I've already mentioned, but yeah, we'll see how that works. Hopefully it doesn't burn all the stuff. It's all alive. Like, well, last year it was all alive. I don't know if it really survived winter yet, but it's all nice stuff. Little bushes, little herbs, little I think this is like a lily or a hosta, little mini. So every now and then I split. Well, last spring was the first time I split, but that's what I'm gonna do from now. Every couple years, or as I meet someone who's looking for something, I can, take a piece of my mature plants, because I have really mature, as I mentioned, and I showed you pictures from last year, and maybe I'll do some splitting in a later episode. This little pot here is my only I think they're called loonies, like, or silver dollar, something about money. They're like the yellow, round yellow leaf vines, so they're starting to come up. I did a quick innovation on my garden hose. I have a tendency to put it down on my patio for some reason. I guess because I leave the hose kind of spread out on the patio here, but they're made so cheap nowadays. So last summer my girlfriend put it down a little bit too hard, and already it has a little leak, and then I think that's also when the bottom of this cracked, so I glued it and it seems to have worked. But I don't want to really take any more chances. So I know it's pretty ugly, but for now it'll do. I was thinking like maybe a gray or green shirt, like scrap cloth or something to tie around. This way it can dry out and it won't really grow mold. We'll see. For now, does the job. I put up a couple of these aluminum. It's a bit dirty, but the rain will wash it a bit. Just give some reflection. Got a lot of birds, nice birds in the area here, but I've come to the conclusion that well, as of now, my theory is worms are more important than bird poop for our gardens. So till I look that up. I also dispersed a bag of sheep manure, you could see, so I still gotta rake it out. Gonna do that. It's supposed to rain tomorrow. Well, 40% chance, but now's the time. Like I already mentioned, a lot of you already know, now's the time to be adding nitrogen high fertilizer. I only added a bag for now, this part of my lawn, because we still aren't for sure on whether or not we're going to be moving. We prefer not to, but it's really going to be up to our landlord. So end of our lease is end of May, so I'll be asking her after our May 1st payment. We're showing her that we can still make our payments. There's really nowhere else to go right now, unfortunately. It's like no properties available, and the ones that are available are like super inflated, super expensive for some reason. During a global pandemic, we'll see how long those ones last on the market before they start dropping their prices. But what else am I doing out here? Yeah, now I'm gonna just plant some morning glories. I showed you these stems from last summer. A couple of them are maple, and I don't think any of these are willow, but this one here, this bigger one, is a willow. This didn't fall off my neighbor's tree. I cut this one off of off the willow at my girlfriend's horse stable. Well, her horse's stable, where her horse is at. What I get is these little stems that fall into our yard from my neighbor's tree, and I think I was able to get a couple. I think there are a couple from last year. I don't know where this one looks. This one might be willow, and yeah, I remember seeing one survived. I don't know which one it is. It might be this one, the stem. But I'm trying these little ones also. Let me know in the comment section. I haven't looked into this. I haven't looked it up yet. I try not to go crazy. I like to experiment and explore for myself. And it also helps me frame the questions that I need to look into, that I need to look up. Otherwise, if I look up everything at the get-go, I get a little overwhelmed sometimes because there's just so much out there. So I made a little hole with just a stick. I don't spend all the money. I have to trim this a little bit more still. Just take off the. I just take off the buds at the bottom, and I know that you might need to split some stems. I don't know if it's these ones or rose stems, but I know some stems that you do this. You need to do these cutting plantings like this. You need to and then just pack the soil around it, and I'll add a little bit more. This is low here. I know, yeah. You cut some stems, and then they have root developer, which is phosphorus, which you can get from your organic, like kitchen scraps. If you do high concentration compost with one of your organic wastes from the kitchen that are high in that content, you don't necessarily need to buy a fertilizer with that. I haven't looked that up yet. Like I said, there's just so much out there, you know. A lot of myths. I was looking up yesterday. What was it? I was looking up some things yesterday. I was looking up rock dust to see the actual benefits and exactly what it's made of, and what it's made of and what its benefits are. And there's no real science on rock dust. And a couple of key gardeners that I've been, like, notable YouTube gardeners that I've been following, when I was learning a lot last spring. Forgot his channel now. There's one guy in particular. He's a good organic grower that I really like, who says I think is a top 5 fertilizers. It's a great video. I will share, by the way, in my description. It says top 5 do's and don'ts or something. Top 5 fertilizers and top 5 bad fertilizers. Good fertilizers and bad fertilizers. And he really recommends rock dust, and apparently they don't really help. And I'll share a good link to a good article that I read on, and there's a thread at the bottom with people who've commented, and it's basically a myth. It's a really interesting conversation, interesting topic. I'll just show you some of the glimmer of the water while I continue my rock dust spiel and sharing my findings. So yeah, I was glad I finally got a chance to look into that topic, because yeah, the guy that I first heard about it from, see the link in the description. He's great. Like, everything he says makes total sense. It's like the most natural kind of gardening advice that I mean, the videos of his that I've seen. I haven't seen all of anyone's videos, any one YouTuber. So, you know, when we endorse each other, endorse people out there, even, you know, websites, blogs, whatever they are, we have to be careful if we're not you know, totally holistic of all of their content. But it makes there was another thing that made sense, because a lot of minerals come from rocks, and if our soil is low on minerals, it makes sense that we're adding minerals through rocks versus the other ways we add minerals. So that implies there might be different minerals in for example, like in sand or rock dust, which is even finer. It's, from my understanding, it's like a powder. I've never really seen it but in person, but in the videos that are in described on websites. So the article I share, got a lot of small planes that come over sometimes. A lot in the area, then sometimes they fly over. So you know, I've seen, yeah, and I'll share the article online. There's a blog, I think it's like a gardening myths or something. I think he's in Ontario as well. So, and he talks about how there's no science supporting rock dust. And in the thread as well, a lot of people kind of defend, like, support using rock dust, and he challenges, saying, he counters their comments, saying, okay, share me some valid, credible science that proves they have an impact. The closest one, the most valid comment I saw in support of rock dust is that if it takes 50 years or a century for rock dust the minerals in rock dust to kind of leach into the soil and to help replenish soil, then it's worth it for our kids' generation, for the next person who comes to live in our house and use our garden. And that's a pretty valid argument. But then again, it all comes down to testing soil, like what our soil requirements are, like what minerals eventually will rock dust provide that our soil might already have in the first place. So I forgot which mineral it was. I'll post it in the video here, but they say there's one in particular, I think, one or a couple in particular minerals that are lacking, are pretty lacking in our soils, that we need to kind of replenish. So if that's the case, then maybe there's a case. But as far as short-term benefit, there's no real short-term benefit of rock dust. And I'm never, the fact that there's no science on one thing, or not at least not legitimate science. There's always pseudoscience for things, but the fact that there's not like the science that's accepted widely throughout the scientific community also doesn't completely convince me, because as someone who believes in God, the fact that there's no legitimate science, if you will, to use the term, the legitimate science, widely accepted science to prove God, there's also no widely accepted legitimate science to disprove God. Same thing with rock dust. So until there's also science that that disproves that it works, right? Like, and it could be the same kind of study. It's just different kinds of science. The scientists from different sides of the debate. So while the author of this website, this article that I read that I'm sharing with you, he's waiting on people who promote it, who are starting off with the hypothesis that it works. He could also be doing his own study. Squirrel fight. He could also be doing his own study to show that it doesn't work, right? And then if he disproves himself, everyone, it'll still have the same impact as a study that will prove it works. So, I mean, lack of study basically means a lack of conclusion. We can't conclude. It's not conclusive. And there's a lot of stuff in this world, like vaccines. I was looking into. Apparently, there's it's very controversial, but the truth is, I'm not scared. I'm not afraid of the truth, and I hope people who watch my videos also won't be. We have to stay open-minded to things, and we have to keep in mind always the follow the money. The monetary factor in things. Which side of each debate has more money? Which side is protecting the interests of parents and kids? Which side has the interest of protecting a business that amounts and as a community amount to multi-billion-dollar industries, i.e. big pharma companies? So there's my little bit of wisdom on that, on these inconclusive gardening topics as they relate to a lot of other topics in life. All right, just gonna plant some morning glories in these hanging baskets. Got a bunch of them here. Got them from a neighbor because she had a little pot of like a few plants. They're thin stems,
They produce so many seeds, and they're beautiful flowers. They're very easy to grow, at least in my zone here. Yeah, you can literally plant more as they're growing. So as soon as you start having flowers that die and produce seeds, you can literally crush the seeds out of their pods, throw them in the ground, kind of like beans. They're like really great survivors, great reproducing plants. So you just throw about, I don't know, 10 seeds I'll do in per tray, because we don't know, right, how many are actually going to germinate, how many are going to get eaten by bugs or birds, molds, whatever. And you can always cut down after. They're literally free from the neighbor and free for you. All you got to do is buy them. They're fertilizer, however you fertilize, and that's all the money you're spending. So you're using all new soil from the store. It's pretty fertile, pretty rich in nutrients. So depending how many roots, what you're growing, what you're planting, the acidity that you, the pH that you need. If you're like, usually I have this, I'll plant the same things a couple years in a row, and I have no issue reusing the soil, unless there's a lot of roots, too many roots, that has kind of locked up all the soil. If you dry it out, break it up, dry it out on like a plastic tarp or something on a sunny day, and just dry it all out, and then you can beat the roots a bit for the soil to fall out, but still you would lose a lot of the phosphorus that stays in those roots that you're not going to use. So if you're organic and try to be sustainable like I am, you will burn and or compost to reuse those to get those vitamins back. All right, some water, and that's that. If you have chipmunk and squirrel issues like I do, be sure to hang them right away somewhere where they can't be reached, or cover them with enough thorns or mesh or anything, plastic cover, especially while they're still germinating, to keep them warm and protected from birds as well. Your garage is actually a great place for this situation, especially since we're still getting a lot of frost. You can keep them in there at least until they germinate, until they sprout, and then start taking them out. If you don't have light in your garage, like grow lights, or that you could put in there, or a window in your garage, you take it out during the day. Sometimes if you're not using your garage and you keep them at the front of the garage, you just open the garage door in the morning, and your whatever plants are there will be able to get enough light to keep them healthy until you can take them out for the whole season. All right, I pulled these salads out from last year, and I decided that I'm going to plant them somewhere else so the rabbits can access. I think there's only really one rabbit, but anyway, I'm gonna plant it where the rabbit can access because I don't know, I can't trap it. We gotta just live with nature, you know. We gotta all live, you know, and work together. So I don't know. He's not the only pest. Otherwise, I would see what I could do. Call it pest control. That's one option. I don't know if there's a hunting season, trapping season. If you need a license or whatever, you might want to look into that. But in my case, I have to protect from raccoon. Well, raccoons is later in the year, but like especially corn. But chipmunks and squirrels do a lot of damage digging and digging for stuff beside my plants, especially baby plants. You don't want to have to lose anything, you know, even the roots of your tomatoes because of squirrels. So I play it safe. So a lot of people mulch. That's what I've been thinking about what I'm gonna do to cover at the bottom, the base of my plants this year. Last year I didn't put anything at the bottom, and I didn't have enough cover crops. So I learned that's not a great idea. Like pretty much everybody covers their soil. You don't want bare soil. So either you're using cover crops or mulch or leaves or sticks, whatever you are doing after you plant. If you got to till your soil. Anyway, I'm gonna get into that, but I'm gonna get into that now. But first, I wanted to say, yes, pest deterrents. I use, I think I mentioned, I know I mentioned rose thorns or tree thorns. Work pretty good for me. And also I have some mesh, chicken mesh, and if you cut like some sections of it, it becomes spiky, like different random areas, and just keep the wires kind of pointing out. I have used cayenne pepper as well, which is supposed to work pretty good, and I can't say that that's exactly what helped. It wasn't like a scientific study per se, but I have used it, and it makes total sense. Bothers our noses. Imagine animal noses. Some of them have way stronger noses. So look into that. But so what I'm doing here is edging, because a lot of the grass and creeping Charlie is already going into my beds. I think I finally got it. Creeping Charlie, not Chester. So it's going into the bed. So I'm taking care of that, and the owls are out too over here. I really don't know how all these squirrels and rabbits survive with so many owls, and hawks. Anyway, it's a very, very biodiverse area. Beautiful. Pretty close to the Oak Ridges moraine. Anyways, so what I'm thinking here is, I already mentioned I left the brush to keep getting the nutrients, to protect the worms, getting the nutrients leaching into the soil, also keeping the soil from drying out. But I want to break the soil a little bit. So what I'm going to do soon is remove I'm thinking is keep the brush. Usually I would compost it or burn it, do both, a little bit of both, and use it on my and then end up using it in a different way. But because I want to cover my my soil this year so it doesn't dry out. Last year was dry because I didn't have it covered. Plants were too spaced out, I guess, to keep it really moist. See, it's already dry. I've been turning a little bit here, and you can see the difference. Today is not even that hot. Imagine in the summer. So, like, this was a couple of years ago when I started this garden. My makeshift aluminum reflectors. So, it's working well. So, you know, like, this was like clay, so it's beautiful now. It's come a long way. What I did was turn it over using a piping shovel. The long, thin shovels goes about 12, I think it's 12 inches. So I turned it all from really deep. I've been promoting worms by you know, putting compost leaves. I turned leaves into there. I've turned some brush into there last spring. And it looks like that's already broken down. There's a lot of, like, not just big animals around here. There's a lot of bugs and you know, worms and healthy, like yeah, bugs that will eat that eat all this organic matter in the soil pretty quick, it seems. So that's good. So it's come a long way. But you know, it still makes a lot of sense. And I've been looking at the last couple of days. I've been really looking into why cover the soil, you know, and it has a number of benefits. So I'm thinking I'm going to hold on to this. I'm not going to get mulch. If anything, I'm thinking of picking up bags of leaves from my neighbors. And using that, putting it around my plants once it's planted. For now, I think I have enough to keep, because it's not very dry yet. It's not very hot. It's raining a lot, so it's, you know, it's more for the birds to not eat all the worms. And there's a lot of worms. Like, I did some turning, and oh yeah, lots of worms. But I saw some here. Got wormies. Don't want to kill them, but you see, it is still some clay, but the most part is very very loose already. There's our one worm. Happy spring. All right, cover it back up. It's too easy for birds. Okay, so that corner I don't really work. That end there I didn't really work as much as the middle areas, which are more broken down now. Anyway, it's coming along. So I think I'll pick up a couple of yard waste bags from neighbor with brush that I could use, because I don't have a lot of I really actually, compared to last year, I think because I raked a lot in the fall, like, I guess I could use what's in here. I'll probably, but I mean, this stuff gets so big on its own. I don't need to remove that. I'd rather not have to add new nutrients and just let that decompose in there to get reused by these perennial and biennial flowers. You know, usually in this corner there's like lots of leaves because this maple here, but I don't know, there's not a lot. So I'll probably collect from someone putting to the curb, and you got to make sure first before you dump it on your lawn that there's not, like, I don't know, dog fur or some crazy organic thing that you don't want in your garden. I mean, maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but just check before. You don't know what you could, dog fur might not be so great, but you don't know what you could find. So I think I will get that. I think yard collection is in a couple days, maybe Friday, I'm not sure, but it's should be sometime this week. Today was garbage day, so. And then what I'll do is, to break up the soil a little bit before I plant anything, is remove the brush, dig my soil in there, pry it up to kind of get some air and water that can go in there, and not turn it over. I'm not turning it over this year. You know, not everyone does that. People don't really do that. My family and our tradition, Italian Canadians, my grandparents always do that. My parents do that. But doing research on my own here, like it seems in North America, gardeners, a lot of gardeners don't really do that unless they are still amending their soil. But even topping up, a lot of gardeners that I'm seeing, they're topping up their soil. They're just adding on top whatever it is. I don't know, compost or lime or anyway. I don't see them really mixing it in. So then thereafter I plant, I will reapply the brush on top around whatever I plant, whatever space is not being used, because that's also natural. You know what I also like to think as an organic, what I like to call, I like to believe, at least I'm an organic gardener, as natural as possible. Keep it as that, you know, I like to follow that motto, right? Like that rule of thumb. What reflects nature, the natural scenario best. If there was a tilled field in the I don't know, in some grassland, right? There never is. It's either covered in grass, covered in brush, or covered in trees. So, you know, if we're opening up soil like that, you know, it's not natural. Natural is covered. So that's what I'm gonna for the first year. And I'm gonna also try to plant more crops in between this year, like chives. Actually, I have not chives. I think I called them chives in my last video, but scallions, onion scallions, and I have a couple coming up from last year here that I had planted and I got at the store. So it's good to see they're coming, but yeah, see the leaves still there and they're coming up no problem. So it's all good. So where were we? Yeah. So like this thorn thing, this thorn tree branch is not going to stay there. I might maybe chop it into smaller pieces, but right now it is deterring, you know, squirrels, and a little bit, at least a little bit right now. Before I as I'm edging and turning areas of soil that's not really covered with brush, I'm going in and turning it already. Well, not turning, breaking it up. I press your shovel in as far as you can go, pry it up, and I did this section already, that's why it's not really prying up, but pry it up and then just leave it, pull your shovel out gently, and then you can do a couple of jabs in there to break up the surface. And I already did that over there, so I don't want to do it again, but that's basically what I'm doing. And where I see weeds, this is my quickest way of pulling them out. Press in all the way down because you want to break up the soil. Pry it up and start pulling. If it's still too hard, you can go a bit closer. You find the stem, you go a bit closer, kind of rock it around as you're pulling, and you can jab at it from underneath a little bit, and there you go. It's a lot easier to pull out. It's quick. You don't have to get on your knees. You don't have to kill your wrists. And and you don't need another tool. It's one shovel, one tool. Keep it simple and save your money. Alright, so press in, pry up. Pry up. A little bit of a weed here. Break it one more time a little bit closer. And pull out gently. Again. Press in all the way. Adidas slippers. Millennial gardening at its finest. With style and comfort. No stress. Gardening is for relaxing. I don't have Crocs. Nor do I want them. Because my sandals are comfy enough. My iPad shut off. Gotta love Apple products in the cold. So I went through this whole bed with the shovel to make sure the soil's loose, and pulled out weeds. There's still some grass stuff along the edges, but I don't plant anything close to the edges because I have my shed, my garage here. So the sun really only hits like most of the day from one end. So instead of leaving grass and then garden bed, I did it all garden bed. And some plants that don't really need sun could be planted there, but right now I'm more concerned about big weeds and breaking up the soil. So I did that, and some areas are actually really loose, which is great. What I've been doing is working. I added a lot of compost last year, as I said, and when I turned the clay, there was a lot of clay because I went really deep. I broke it up into small pieces right away with my shovel. That's really important. Because otherwise clay to break down on its own, just tilling, just digging a bed and turning from the bottom, bringing the clay up, mixing it in big chunks isn't really going to help the situation for many years unless you're breaking those chunks up. So I wanted to say I may make a trough. I started doing like a little trough along the end to bring the soil more into the middle where I'm going to plant plants, but I did the same on the other side. So my level of my bed is actually already a little bit high. I don't want it too high, just because I don't want the plants to be too dried out. So if we go down to grass level, you can see it's already a few inches. I just dug it now, so it's obviously it's got to sink now a little bit, but you know what, I'm not a big fan of going too high, and that starts the conversation of raised beds versus beds in the ground. I know for pests, rodents and stuff, they're definitely better, and then depending on the insulation you have in there to prevent your water drainage. But it seems like a lot more science to me. I know a lot of veggies like tomatoes in my zone 5 will do better in pots, and carrots and potatoes a lot of people do as well. Just for being in control of the soil, that they know exactly the soil they buy is very fine, and they're putting in the soil and that in the ground, and that's all that plant is gonna stay within, and it's not gonna make demented fruits and all that. But I might try it for those but not tomatoes. Tomatoes, my family's always done in the ground, and I think they'll always taste the best in the ground. Also, we don't have a lot of pest issues in my region here with tomatoes. So I mean, healthy, as long as you're doing the basics and keeping healthy plants, which we do, we don't run into issues with tomatoes. So that is that. I put the thorns and some sticks back on, and I've started. Broke up the manure pieces to spread them out more evenly. So I am cleaning this bed. Same thing, edging, breaking up the soil, ripping some weeds. Mostly they're along the edge. Right, see this area I haven't done yet. And the brush I just raked out of the way, and I will rake it back on once I'm done. This soil still has some roots. You see, it's pretty close to these. There's like a bush. There's another thorn tree. This yard is like so much. I had to cut down this pine like maybe by a third last summer, and it's already growing wild too. So I don't know if the original owners used to use a lot of fertilizer, but it looks like by the looks of the size of these trees, with the stream, it's just a very lush, fertile area. Also considering we're close to the Oak Ridges moraine, some very great nutritious soils here. So there was clay when I dug. So I don't know what the builders, obviously this is not native land, so it's not native earth, so who knows, maybe the topsoil the builders brought in was pretty decent, like from the area, something similar to Oak Ridge's soil. Anyway, I wanted to show you here how happy I am with the worms in this section, in this bed. So many. At every shovel that I grab here, there's worms. It's just amazing. Let's see. Working with one hand here, but let's see. Another one there. Crazy. It's amazing. See what I mean with the roots? Just a lot of creeping Charlie. Here's another one. Worms. So I wanted to say, grandparents, well, one side, my mom's parents, they would just break the soil every year, turn it over, the depth of the shovel, turn it over, mostly to drop the brush from on top, like the leaves and seeds and whatever that are on top, into the soil, to kill any of these little weeds. They wouldn't waste their time plucking. So it's more of a time kind of routine that my mom's parents use. And I guess, yeah, and to break up clumps, right? They would this is not a big clump for them. Like they wouldn't really add a lot of soil. I don't know. Maybe they did, but I know big clump they would turn, and then big clumps they would break up with the soil. I don't know if it was an issue of like moving too often, where they were working on the beds that were still very clay, and maybe a money thing that they didn't want to buy things to top up, but also a combination of not really knowing. I'm not exactly sure, but they always had delicious fruits, vegetables, both berries. My mom's parents were always very successful growers, with no commercial. And those days when I was a kid, there wasn't even there wasn't even a lot of products for that, for gardening, home gardening. Fruits and like edibles, more for grass and trees, flowers, other stuff like that. It's a bit windy now. I don't know if you can hear me, but I basically removed the big branch and kind of eased my way under the brush with the shovel, because you don't want to push brush into your soil. At least I don't want to with this technique I'm doing, trying to work around the brush, leaving it. I'm gonna leave it all summer, try to and still work the soil a bit. So some sections are very loose already, which is really good on this bed, and some sections that weren't, I broke up like I demonstrated. Just press in, pry up, and then maybe a couple other stabs to break the surface, the dry layer. So you can see the bed refreshing, I guess we call it. We could call it, is coming out nice. The soil is pretty fine. Looks a bit sandy. Here it's compact. The untouched spot, see, well, I guess because I'm stacking, like piling it up a bit. There's a stone kind of lining. That kale just dying to stay alive. So long, I'll show you. So it's about 1-2 feet width, this bed, and I did it along the original rock. There was no beds, there was no garden, no veggie garden here when we moved in, so I had to make all the bed, just flower beds. So the flower bed back there is about 3.5 feet between the fence, with a lot of perennials. So the stone lining there, kind of covering it right now, but as I finish working, it'll all come out. You'll see it. I'll end up seeing it again later, unless I build some structures over my plants for pests or for warmer temperatures. I want to show how I pull weeds out. Basically shown it already, but I want to stress, how much easier it is. Like when the soil is wet, it is a lot easier. Like you could actually pull them out with roots, like delicate baby weeds like this. But when it's dry, that's like a tree coming up here. When it's dry, it's really hard to get, especially this creeping Chester, creeping Charlie. So, I mean, I don't know, sometimes I work in wet conditions, especially when I'm gardening for clients. Can't really pick and choose what day you want to make money on, but when I am gardening in dry conditions, like today, relatively dry, go under, dig under, and pry up, and it really loosens the weeds. And get as close as you can, but dig down. Don't dig on an angle because you don't want to cut the roots. And the soil breaks. It will just break in half, in pieces, and crack right down. And you see this guy, I'm following it, staying a little, like getting close but not too close, kind of seeing what direction it's going in. And I'm going slow for you. Usually I would go faster. seems like it's part of this one here. So if we come at it from a different side, different angle, we can go right down, pry up, shake it a bit, try to crack, pull the shovel out, shake, and you'll see that the ground begins to split, and then it's way easier to just toggle and pull, and you get pretty much all the roots. So what I do is throw my weeds into a pile on the grass where they're not going to blend as much as, you know, in the flower bed or somewhere else. So you can also get a container, throw them in, and then do what you want. Throw them in the garbage, burn them. I still haven't looked up whether or not compost is effective at killing a diverse range of weeds. If I had just a few weeds, it would be easier to look into. But so I came to give these guys their daily watering. You see at the bottom of the trays, I watered it already, and now we're just gonna spray the top. My girlfriend's gonna help me spray a little bit from above. Not yet, it's okay. And I notice, as you probably noticed already, a bunch of sprouts. So I'm going to remove the ones that are long enough, like this one here. These guys are all competing to win. We got, what is that? Organic cauliflower, sprouted already, and lettuce, bib lettuce. It's very thin. Hopefully it'll be alright. And this guy is kale. And this is another kale sprouted. And this one is cauliflower. Cool. I'm surprised the other lettuce hasn't yet sprouted. But they come out quick, so probably in less than, like, before even tomorrow morning they might come up. Okay, so I've added some temporary saucers. I don't like to use clear saucer like bottles for this purpose, just because the sun will get in and maybe create some mold or whatever. But eventually, but if I do end up using them, I will definitely cut some holes for air circulation. But I'm going back outside. I just came in a bit to cool off, to warm up the iPad a bit, and grab some seeds. So I think I'm going to do some planting today, outdoor planting. So these will stay beside my north side window for a bit, just for them to adapt to a little bit of light. And I'm going to monitor the dryness level of the soil. So right now it's about 6 o'clock, so we'll see in a few hours if the surface of the soil is pretty dry. Then I'll probably cover with a plastic bag or something, with elevation, not like contacted onto the pots. Couple, like maybe an inch even off a couple inches off the pot, not too high, but not obviously contacting these sprouts overnight. And then tomorrow check out water again and make sure they're getting some light and water, enough light and water. The rest are still germinating over the vent. Hopefully we'll have some more tomorrow. That's really quick. All right, back outside here, and I forgot I had to do this bed still, prep it for planting. So I'm not sure that I'll be able to do any planting today, but that's fine. The sun's already starting to go down, and it's like, I don't know, it feels like -2, I think it said right now. So cold does catch up to the iPad and me. But I'm just started this one here. And as I'm pulling out this creeper here, I always take note of, you know, what the soil is like around these weeds that we don't like, or at least I don't like here. And I notice it's always clay. Like when I pull out a chunk of this stuff, there was a big chunk of clay just stuck, like it doesn't come apart. And it's not the roots holding it, that soil together, it's the soil holding itself to get sticking on its own together. The other ones don't do the same. You know, this one here, pulled it out, shook it off, you know, and it's like nicer soil around that one. So, you know, it's case in point that when we take care of our garden, take care of our soil, you know, weeds and pests take care of themselves. On most occasions, I think that's very valid. Another thing I wanted to show is that as I'm edging, I'm pulling the weeds. I'm going a lot on the angle here. I edge, pull the weeds, and break up the soil in the bed. But after, I go around and I try to go down as like even inward angle, but with the back of the shovel as much as possible to cut any roots that might be, you know, traveling from under my my little trench here, because that's only about 4 inches. So I don't know what else there is under there, like what else is any of these roots are traveling you know, right under this trench. So, and I also want to keep, I want to keep kind of like a ledge, like a cliff, so that the creeper, especially the viney weeds, as they explore over the edge, they're gonna hang there. They're gonna be easier for me to see, or they're gonna be less likely to pass. They're gonna less likely to invade the bed. So just one extra thing that I like to do. Last year I didn't really do it. You could see from last year's edge, I kept like the common landscapers 45 angle, and I think that's more for optics, and it does keep a little bit of a separation. You keep you know, touching it up, which I did, but I think this is just more to go more inward is just more peace of mind, I guess, and less maintenance. All right, so this bed, there's a lot of worms, and I went pretty deep, and there's no like limestone really, so I don't really think that's the thing, unless something to do with the heat or the drainage on this side of the bed. But anyway, I want to show that I'm finding a lot of clay still in here, even though it did me really well last year. Like, this is not very desirable. So throwing it into flower bed over there, and I'll have to add a bit more compost. So my compost is almost ready, maybe in a few days. It's supposed to get some warmer temperatures now at the end of this week again, so I'll definitely add some in here, because the manure I decided I'm not going to be using in here, and coffee I'm not putting directly in here. That's just for nitrogen anyway, so I'll put that in. I put that already in the compost. Alright, I gotta do a super quick video here to show you the finished result of cleaning up this bed. And it's high off patio level. I have to still make a little trench for water drainage here, otherwise it puddles a little bit and then I end up with soil on the patio. So I might end up transferring some of this soil, but anyway, I wanted to show quickly before it's a bit chilly here now and this stuff shuts quick. Found a bunch of rocks. I just want to add here that I always liked keeping rocks in my garden when I used to garden at my mom's house.
and also gardening here for the last couple of years. I always felt like because they contain a lot of minerals that they would leach like beneficial minerals to the garden. But now that I've looked up rock dust as an actual powder, rock in powder form, doesn't really have even a long term, depending what you consider long term, effect on the garden. I'm not so sure there it's really necessary, and I also used to like it because I assumed it would make the plants more hardy and kind of work harder to um, be stronger, like to survive, and therefore produce stronger um, fruit. Also, health like more with more flavor. I don't know why I made that assumption, but until I look into that, probably for this summer, I'm not going to. I'm just removing all the rocks, especially in this bed. I'm also learning that the plants that I'm growing here, well, actually, I reflected that I'm I've been thinking about the plants that I've been growing and whether or not they might be better off with um, more rocks. And I don't think they're really from very arid, like rocky areas. I know, like rosemary, for example, um, when I travel to Italy, I know they have a very arid geography, growing conditions. It's pretty dry with a lot of rocks, and the rosemary plants like rosemary thrive in those conditions. So I know also my grandfather, one of my grandfathers adds rocks to his rosemary pots. He normally keeps them in pots as well as his olive tree that he keeps in pots. But other than that, stuff like tomatoes, broccoli, cauliflower, zucchini, um, I'm not really sure that they're meant to grow in arid conditions. So until I look into which plants that I'm growing, if any, are meant to be in more rocky conditions, then I'm going to leave rocks out of my garden and see what differences I notice.
Weeds I'll leave to dry for a couple days, and the brush over there I'll brush back on. It's got some thorns and stuff.
Thanks for watching another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something or have something that you thought you could share with my viewers and myself, or that you maybe even thought of some new questions, some new things that you can research now, and maybe even consider sharing your findings with us. Um, Next episode will be out soon, episode 4. Come along. I'm going to be pruning our rose bush and continue prepping and amending my soil and garden beds in the yard. I'm going to continue monitoring the progress of our seedlings, and I am also going to be building an outdoor greenhouse for one of my beds. Thanks again. Please check out some of my other videos and subscribing, and I always appreciate when you share my videos as well. Thanks so much, and see you soon.